Welcome to On the Chain with Jeff and Chip.
Hey, this is Jeff with On the Chain. I've got Chip here with us, and we have a special guest today, XRP Venture, coming in. Hey, welcome, Venture. How are you?
Great. Good to see you guys. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome having you on. Man, now you started your channel about a month and a half, 2 months ago, and you've really taken off. It's really impressive. You do a lot of your focus has been on XRP. Can you just tell us a little bit about your motivation? You know, what actually got you to the point of starting to make some videos?
Well, my background in digital assets period was I spent the first year just researching Bitcoin mining. I thought I was going to buy a couple, ASICs miners and throw them in the back room. And, so I spent a full year studying that and finding out, by the time I understood that, and I understood that really wasn't for me. I didn't see it being very profitable for either my time or what have you. I just decided finally, I just need to buy the asset and hold it, and I'll just be an investor. That's when I, started looking at which coin would I buy, what do I really want to invest in, and that's when I ran into XRP. And to this day, I can't remember what I stumbled on first where I discovered XRP. But anyway, so I jumped in there and made my first purchase, and then I just kept more and more, and I just learned more and more, and I wanted more and more, and and then I was like, to the point where I am now, where I know where I know where this is headed. I've got two theories where I believe it's headed, but I'm convinced either one is good, and my investment is safe. But and then I shared with you a little bit earlier that this is when the very first video I shot, it was just some thoughts that were rattling around in my head, and I wasn't hearing anybody out there say it. And so I shot a little video to put the two together, and that's where it kind of started. And I was really kind of surprised that people liked what I even said, because it was just off the cuff, wandering up and walking back and forth across the porch of my office. So it just kind of taken on from there, just kind of taken off. Like I said, I didn't know anybody would care what I said, but I just thought I'd throw it out there to, I think originally I just thought I'd shoot a quick little video and throw it on Twitter. I had no intention of actually starting a channel. So yeah. As you guys know, it just takes on a life of its own.
It really does. And it seems like, you've kind of, you got the attention, from some of the bigger players in the space, right away. Whether it was on DAI or CKJ, and I think at the end of the day, what it is, people have a passion for for someone that's being realistic and speaking from the heart, and not just about fluff and hype. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that's true, and I hope that's true about me. I don't have any kind of a script. I don't have I'm just literally kind of just throwing the thoughts that that are, like I said, rolling around in my head together about what I think we're at. And I really hope that lots and lots of families get a financial gain from this opportunity. That's what I really hope, because as a dad, as a husband, I don't want to break my arm, pat myself on the back, but I've developed some skill sets in my life. And I don't know how many licenses you have to have, how many things you have to be proficient at to make a living for your family. And I just know the things that I can do in my skill sets. And I think I've got some things that help me a bunch, but I know a lot of other people can't do some of the things that I do. And I just don't know how they make a living. I don't know how you make a living at, $12 an hour at Home Depot. I don't know how people do it. And it kind of breaks my heart that it's so tough. And that's here in the US, where, even our worst case, we've got, we're better off than most of the world. So I just hate I really hope for a level playing field for everybody, for a lot of families. And, obviously lots and lots of folks don't know anything about this opportunity. Everybody tries to share it. It's a little bit like trying to share the gospel. They run from you, but that's okay. Though every once in a while you get somebody that'll listen. But that's really my hope, is that if I share anything on my videos, it's just that, kind of sincerely what I hope for people, and that I want them to, I really get frustrated with people, not understanding that some people are really need this and are banking on it and hoping for it. And it gets depressing to wake up and see it 22 cents again. You want to see it. It's human nature. You want to see it go the other way. And so I do try to give them some kind of encouraging remarks about, hey, it's okay to have be a little disappointed, but we'll have a good day. It's coming back.
I think you bring up a good point though. And that's what, it's both good and bad. It could also be a little bit troubling. Some people have potentially unrealistic expectation, of where the market can go, especially when you're in a speculative investment, as so you put money in with anticipation that it's going to explode, similar to, IPOs, for instance, you're investing in high tech, and you just have no idea which way the market's going to go, to me, a lot of people are going into it unrealistically because they're looking at short-term gains and they think they can, get short-term benefit. Whereas it's any form of speculative investment could be long-term, it could be a year, it could be 5 years, it could be 10 years down the road, and some people are putting too much, in to where their expectation is that they're going to get a lot out in a short, period of time. And that also is a little bit troubling. And I think that's where, a lot of these other channels, they start filling, space with nothing but hype, and then you get all this FOMO attention and hype, and it keeps it going. But I'm not saying that, that's just necessarily the fault of certain YouTube channels, because you're also seeing it in the media. The media, if we go back to 2017, the media was a big instrument in the FOMO hype that was pushing Bitcoin up to 20,000 at the time. And, and you saw them pile on. And then you saw the other side of it, which is the media hype on the back end, which is the FUD, and now they're going all negative against it and driving the market down, and so that's where you see, market control. And, I think at the end of the day, it's about, information, whatever we can bring to the space. Like you said, you're hoping, to open up some people's eyes to it, and get outside of that, the confine of hype. I think it's counterproductive, so it's great. When I started watching your channel, and, seeing your videos come out, that to me is what, you're sitting there on the porch and you're having a conversation. And I think that's what's needed, and I like that, I thought that was important.
Well, I appreciate that. And I do think you're right that, some people do have unrealistic expectations. Nobody, I mean, literally nobody has any idea where this is going and when it's going there, other than, what all long-term ultimately we hope it's going to be.
I was gonna ask you a question, Venture. We always like to find out more about the people, because and as much as you want to share, but I wanted to talk about the cowboy hat, because I'm wondering when was the first time you put that hat on? Where did you buy it? What turned you on to it? Was it, and why that, did you ever wear baseball caps? I mean, I'm just curious of what, that first time you grabbed a hat.
Well, I mean, I've worn hats all my life since I was, 18, 19 years old. I love country music, and my dad played country music, and that's just been, living in Arizona, it's a lot like Texas, that's just kind of lots of folks do it. But I wear baseball caps all the time. I mean, I've got a few videos. I mean, I got a whole collection of baseball caps, but, this particular hat is a George Strait Resistol. But but there's a trick to it. There's a little trick. You got to put that little crease right there to
There you
give it
go.
its own unique little flavor. But I had one guy that asked me commented on one of the YouTube videos, man, where do I get a hat like that? So I put a link in the description where he could find one, and he bought one, and he sent a picture of it, wearing it. But I've worn cowboy hats all my life. I've had several of them, and that in fact, my profile picture, shoot, that's probably 15 years ago. It's an old picture. I'm a creature of habit. Same hat. Not the same hat, same brand of hat.
Right.
But yeah, it's just who I am.
Gotcha. So I have a collection of hats as well. I buy them at concerts. I buy them, I was down in Chile and I bought one at the distillery I was at. And it's weird. I never wear them. It's a really weird, odd sort of a thing. I look like a nut job, and I should wear one on one of these streams, but I love hats. I just don't really, I don't know, for some reason. Maybe it's Florida, Jeff. It's hot down here. It's hot to wear a hat when it's 90% humidity outside. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay, can you guys
Phoenix
pause? Can we pause real quick? Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, I lost Jeff's audio there.
He's pausing here for a second.
All right. Hey, Chip, that's funny with the hats. I have a collection of hats as well. And, but I tend to wear certain hats. I have typically, the baseball style hat. But I think it's important, I shave my head. I find that with the hot sun here, I have no other choice.
Well, it's not very functional in Phoenix either at 115 degrees. But since I live in the mountains, our summer is where everybody from Phoenix comes up here on the weekend to get out of the heat. And then in the winter, of course, we're snow. So it's a lot more doable up here in the cool country.
Yeah, but it looks cool. That's the most important feature of all.
That's really what it matters.
I'm like, that's really what it comes down to. Let's face it, man. You got to be a badass wearing a hat, because not everybody can pull that look off, Venture. That's your sort of like patented look.
I was gonna say. Yeah.
It's really kind of funny how many people have commented about the hat. I mean, it just blown me away. It's like, okay, so now it's part of my branding, I guess.
Well, we would get suspicious down here in Florida if we saw a guy like, maybe not your cool hat, but something along the lines of that, like walking around. We might like watch him a little bit, like get in a car, like who is this? Because it's odd to see it here. But I go to Dallas where my brother lives, and man, everyone's wearing hats, so it's sort of territorial as well. I think that's why a lot of people are from out of the area, and you probably attract a lot of people from other countries, and they're like, hey, what's up with the hat? That's a cowboy hat. I've watched some cowboy movies, and
that's quintessential America right there.
Right on, man. That is all American.
You got the right swag to pull it off. But what's funny though is that you wouldn't think, but South Florida and Florida in general is big horse country, and nobody knows that. And so the area that I live in used to be big time horse country, and not so much with the development now. But there's a couple boot stores that are right next to the feed stores. And they have a huge presence for cowboy boots. So it's, was common. You'd see people walking around with cowboy boots at least. And we have horseback riding not too far, behind the house. And then as you go up a little bit further north, actually a little further north where Chip's at, and they have polo fields. And then when you go further north in Florida, it's big cow country, So, and that's something that I don't think most people realize in Florida. But it's not cowboy hat country. So
yeah, it isn't. It's weird.
That's great to see. Texas and Arizona.
When we have a massive meetup, when XRP hits $10 or something, I'll be easy to find.
Yeah, right. Just look for the hat about you. Look for the hat, but you might wear a black one. It might throw us off.
Yeah. I'm gonna mix it up. Yeah.
That black Bart. Or something.
It was a 20X Stutson. A brown felt one that was my favorite one. It was awesome.
Yeah.
And also the other. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, in the area that you live in, do you have horses and cattle around you, or what kind of area is it like up in?
Well, where I live, it's a rural town in northern Arizona. The big events, in this town and the neighboring towns within 30 and 45 minutes away is always the annual rodeos. Mm-hmm. So it's a thing around here.
So I was going to ask you, you're into country music. What are some of your favorite artists? And I mean, there's probably a bunch of like, what do you put in like the top three or maybe the top five that, and they probably change off and on but which ones do you like?
Well, they don't change. Um, my wife knows on Saturday morning, all I want is my old Chevy truck and some traditional country music and a dirt road.
There
And
you
then I'm
go,
happy.
man.
And I'm happy. But I don't think, I think they quit making country music after 1990. Is kind of my
I
view
go
of
back
it.
further than that myself personally,
Well,
but
it's too much pop. It's not the same. But
no.
my last, you know, to me, the last real country artist that I really, really enjoy is Garth Brooks, Dwight Yoakam,
Hmm.
George Strait.
George
And then you
Strait,
can go
yeah.
way back to, Conway Twitty and Johnny Cash and Merle Haggard.
Yeah, I was gonna
So
say Merle Haggard and Johnny Cash. I mean, it was funny. My dad took us to a concert. I was 12 years old in Toronto. We saw Johnny Cash. First concert I ever went to. 12 years old. Johnny Cash, June Carter singers. Man, what that left such an amazing impression on me. I was just maybe because it was my first one, but to see Johnny Cash and we were pretty close to the stage and there was a lot going on and then different, because he had a big family back then. He used to travel with. And then June would sing, and then the sisters would get up there and sing. And I have to tell you, that's when I became a Johnny Cash fan. So it's always kind of a cool little thing to say, hey, yeah, I saw Johnny Cash live. I was 12 years old, but still, it was awesome, you
yeah,
know?
I actually met him in person too. Uh,
Nice.
in fact, there's a story that my dad played the steel guitar, and we lived in Nashville. And they don't use a steel guitar a lot anymore in bands because it's a fifth player, and
Hmm.
they don't want to pay for the fifth instrument. But years ago, I mean, the steel guitar is what a lot of the sound of country music was. And my dad was known as the best steel man on the East Coast, but I mean, we're talking 40 years ago, what have you? That at one night he was invited to go over to Johnny Cash's house. He was playing with Buck Owens at the time, and he was
Hmm.
invited to go over to Johnny Cash's house for a party. And he's like, "Nah, I'm going home." I mean, this was Johnny Cash just getting started. He wasn't anybody either, and my dad was tired. So I'm sure if he knew who and what he would have become, he would have gone to that after party. But anyway, I actually had a chance to meet him. I was managing a country bar down in Phoenix at one point, and he actually came to the bar at Grand Central Station and did a concert with us there.
Oh,
So
nice. What kind of guy was he in person? Like, how was his demeanor?
he's just a humble guy.
Yeah,
He just, he's just a good guy, just a humble.
that's pretty awesome. That's one of the things we like to uncover on these chats. It's like, it's amazing. Who would have known that? I mean, this is fantastic stuff. And so there's something we have in common, Venture. We have Johnny Cash. Jeff, how about you? Anybody famous you met, like, musicians or someone pretty cool that you want to share with
Politician
us?
wise.
Well, it could be anybody. I mean,
I've met
Your
quite a
audio
few
cut out there.
politicians.
Sorry.
I've met quite a few politicians. But from it's interesting too because I look at people when they're in awe of an athlete or a musician or something like that. I can remember when I saw Newt Gingrich. I was in D.C. And I always looked up to Newt Gingrich back in the day, and it was funny. We were there for an event, and we are just walking through the plaza, and there was a microphone set up. So of course we walk over, I'm standing right next to the microphones, like right here. I'm standing next to the mic and they got the cameras and, nothing had been going on yet. And all of a sudden Newt Gingrich just walks up. I'm like, and that was awesome,
Did you
so,
say
but
hello, Mr. Speaker?
I did. Yeah. And that was, and then it's funny. We're at the event and he's up there on stage talking and there was a small group of us. Everyone else is dead quiet, and then there's us at our table yelling Newt, Newt, and that was funny. I listened to the recording and the playback, and and it was just funny, But that's politics has always been something that's been important to me, but to me I don't know.
Yeah, well, I've met
That's
Trump on several
that's
occasions and
my
also
story.
did a deal with his, with my last company with his organization. So that was always pretty cool to have that, um, sort of, I looked up to him when I read the book, The Art of the Deal. Kind of really helped me shape my business sensibilities and gave me, if you want to understand the man, just read the book. You pretty much get what he does and how he, but if you don't know it, then you see it as being brash and everything else, but there is a lot of strategy behind it. And also too, I want to comment on the t-shirt. This is something that my dad instilled in me. He's like, you always wear a t-shirt, it's like a radiator, he would tell me. And so I see the t-shirt. I was like, it's like, I remember growing up, that was like what we had. That was part of our uniform. We had to wear that white t-shirt. And so, today I don't have one on, but I do wear it. Like if I'm wearing a business suit, it's a must. I wear that. You don't see it, it's underneath, but yeah, that's always, that's between that. I think that's your trademark, and then, that t-shirt, something that stood out to me. But let's talk about XRP a little bit. XRP, there's a lot of stuff going on. Venture people are, like you said, maybe a little bit bummed out, a little bit disturbed. But what do you see happening with all the good that's happening as far as the foundational things that Ripple's laying down and all of these other quarters that are starting to open up? What do you think is next for Ripple and XRP?
Well, like I've shared before, to me, there's only one of two things going on. Ripple is either has signed NDAs with IMF, central banks around the world, and governments around the world, and they have got a strategy and a plan to roll out in the event of a financial crisis that's bigger than '08. Or they are simply a startup company that has they've pulled together a great team that has 300 customers and are opening corridors and going as fast as they can. And, it's still a good company and good investment. But if it's the latter and there is a financial crisis or even if it's rolled out to avoid a crisis, I think there's some potential for XRP to be used to do a global currency reset. Digital Asset Investor did an example the other day, which I agreed with. The US owes China and Japan both equally the same amount of money. We owe them both $1.2 trillion. But if you gave them $1 billion XRP each out of the escrow, and you think, well, why would Ripple give them their escrow? Well, why wouldn't you? If I was holding $6 billion personally, I'd give them that $50 billion in a heartbeat. If it meant my $6 billion were going to go through the roof. But if it could also solve a problem like the world debt that is mathematically already unsustainable, then you have to, one of two things is going to happen. It's either completely implode and we're going back to, the Stone Age, or somebody's got a solution for this mess, and you take XRP's escrow and you would do it with each country, or at least the G20 or whatever. We give 1 billion to China, 1 billion to Japan, and then you reevaluate and reset the price of XRP so that now in Digital Asset Investor, of course, his example was $5,000 a coin. Now all of a sudden, China and Japan both have 3.8 trillion over the 1.2 trillion of debt they were owed, and are more than they don't care about the US's 1.2 trillion anymore in debt. They just got 3.8 trillion in a digital asset. So if you had a computer model simulated of all the countries and all that they owe and who owes who what and how much XRP they should all get to level the playing field and wipe it all out completely, all you have to do is reevaluate the price of this new digital asset that has never existed before. So the question then, well, how do you get there? Well, I think the one theory is, and we're hearing an awful lot of talk about backing it by gold. Not so much, and it could be backing, I don't want to, okay. So one way to do it is, if you look at the debt clock and down in the bottom corner, one of the other tabulations and calculations that's going on is gold. What gold should be priced at today based on what it was in 1929 when we were actually on the gold standard. And so this debt clock is running. And if gold was today what it was then, it should be closer to $76 an ounce, not $1,500. So then if you start saying, okay, well, we're going to tie XRP to gold, that's one way to do it, to instill confidence and to establish a real value. They could go to the ounce or to the gram or whatever. They could figure out some mathematical thing that makes sense, or a fractional tying to gold. Because even when we were on the gold standard, when Nixon took the U.S. off the gold standard in 71, all he did was, we were still on a fractional basis anyway, but they needed to come off even that. So it really wasn't one-to-one like it used to be. It had been depleted, but now we were off completely. So I could totally see this implosion or this crisis coming, and Donald Trump and Christine Lagarde and Putin and President Xi and other players around the world, G20, hey, we're all getting together and we're going to, wipe out the world debt with this new asset. That's one possibility. But I tell you that, but I told you that story to tell you another one. I don't even think that's going to happen. I don't think XRP will be backed by gold. I don't think it has to be, because it will become the bridge currency that Ripple wants it to be, and will be that cross-border remittance. What I do think will happen, though, is I think each country, just like China's setting up to do, China, Russia, the US, and other G20, G7 nations will have their own digital currency, their own walled garden. And I think those will get backed by gold.
Interesting.
And then that's an interesting theory, I think.
XRP will then be traded back and forth, and everybody will accept that, because that is now the world's reserve currency that everybody accepts. Right. It has value because everybody wants it. Nobody wants Russia's walled garden but Russia. Nobody wants US digital coin because, except the US. And so when we owe China money, we'll send them XRP, and when China owes them, they'll send it back in XRP, and so on. So
that also raises another point. I mean, they tried that with the euro. The euro, each country had their own sort of valuation of what it was worth. I mean, if you had the euro and you were in Spain versus if you went to another country, what you could buy or what that really was worth, even though the banknotes were the same. I think that poses another issue. I think our big problem is the Federal Reserve. You got to go back to December 23rd, 1913, when this Federal Reserve hoax was cast upon us, because we don't have we don't have sovereignty with our own currency. Like if you're a country, you don't own your own currency, and you have some, like, for example, tell me the last time the Federal Reserve was audited. Never. Tell me the last time, right? So tell me what goes on behind the scenes. What kind of shenanigans are they doing? Who's getting the money? Where's that money being filtered to? And I think when you see Trump pressing this a lot with the Federal Reserve, you know that this is coming. The Fed has to get crushed. The Federal Reserve has to go away, and it has to happen in other countries so they have sovereignty as well.
So let me just touch on my last point real quick. I'll button that up. But if each country has their own walled gardens, the reason I believe that those will get backed by gold is because they have to instill the confidence in the people again. If we have another meltdown, or if they roll this out just before a meltdown, we've got the repo market going crazy and the Fed producing 100 billion a day just to keep it afloat. At some point, if it implodes and it collapses, I could totally see Trump saying, listen, hey, that whole collapse, that was bad. That should have never happened, but they did this to you. We're going to start this new digital economy, and we're going to back it by gold, because our politicians should have never taken us off the gold standard. And I'm Donald Trump, and I put you back on the gold standard, and, thank you, Trump, and whatever, and off we go. But I think the walled gardens backed by gold instills the confidence in the people that their money has value again after a collapse.
Possibly.
And then XRP, again, doesn't have to be backed by gold, because it becomes the cross-border that everybody agrees on through the digital agreements that they've all signed. You may remember when Trump went to Japan 4 months ago, great deal for agriculture, our farmers, yay. But by the way, we're here to work on our digital economy. Said the same thing with China. Yeah, great for our farmers, but great deal for our financial, economy as well. So they're working on something behind the scenes for this whole digital economy. And it's something new. It has to be something new. Because right now, if I owe you $1,000 and we're both at Bank of America, that's already digital. Nobody's moving any money from my account to your account. So that's not what he's talking about. A digital economy is something new. So, anyway, that's just my theory about, where this thing could possibly go that to instill confidence. But as far as a conspiracy in the U.S., there are plenty of people that already think that Trump is setting up a separate Department of Treasury. This is where it's going to get funky. Have you guys heard that?
Well, no, but yes and no. But I mean, the Federal Reserve has to go away. It's a system that's built on debt, and debt crushes it. And its lifespan is 50, 60, 70 years. We've already surpassed the lifespan of that. So I don't know that he's necessarily setting it up, but there will be. It could come in the form of a default. But I do think the other side of that is that what we may see is that bridge currency or an explosion in value could cover a lot of. It's going to get messy. But it has to happen. And taking us off, when you can print money, I mean, look at the U.S. It's a joke where you print money. So they're pumping $100 billion into what? $100 billion of what? I mean, I'm just shocked that the dollar's kept its. Yeah, it's counterfeiting. It's like a game. It's a license to print and just blow up. But look at the dollar. Dollar stayed relatively. And then look at Great Britain. When I look at Great Britain and I see that the smartest decision they made, forget about the whole Brexit thing. But they said, yeah, we're going in we're going to be part of the European Union. But hey, guess what? Just to let you know, we're going to keep the pound. Was the greatest decision they ever made. It was the smartest thing they did. And everyone worries. I mean, I think it would have been much more difficult in a Brexit scenario to then untie themselves and go back to. But you look at the Netherlands, look at the guilder versus, like, let's say the euro. Look at some of these other countries where I don't think the euro did them any justice, right? And then it's great. I mean, think about the United States. There was a bunch of states. It's all under one country. The euro sort of the European Union tried to do that, but where their downfall was is they had these unelected legislators in Brussels that were deciding, 50, 60% of what was happening in these other countries. They're unelected.
They weren't prepared. They weren't prepared for it economically. If you look at the EU, at this point, there were countries that were wealthy, like Germany, and then there were countries that weren't, like Greece. And they basically tried to, they're trying to mesh everybody together. And the downfall was Germany ended up supporting the economies that were downtrodden, let's call them, and then you have a country like, then you have a country like Greece that the cost of goods had to increase, because the other problem with the EU is that they set a standard of pricing. So everyone had to abide by a certain standard of pricing, more or less, with certain minimums. And now all of a sudden the cost of goods went up in Greece, and that was, I think, one of the biggest impacts, negative impacts of the euro. But here's another thing to think about, and I guess 2 points. One is that Trump has now had two quote unquote secret meetings with Mark Zuckerberg. One, the latest one was in October when Zuckerberg was dragged in front of Congress and the Senate again, and Trump sat down and had a meeting with him. So is it over Facebook or was it over Libra? What was the purpose of that? The other point to bring up is what China's doing right now. And, China, trying to legalize, quote unquote, legalize the digital currency market, announcing that they're coming out with their own central bank backed currency, while at the same time banning exchanges, which they've been doing all along anyways. But they want to make sure that the government is in control of what's happening within China. So I think, there's a lot at play here. And I bring up China because of the point with the debt and everything else that's going on. But is there another play going on right now? Is Trump shopping the market and looking at, Ripple and looking at, Libra? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, put your hand up. I like that.
You get all fired up.
Get them. Go get a venture.
As far as China, I'm convinced they're dodging, their news and press releases on, dogging digital assets and all of that is because they want everybody to run to their digital asset, their coin. They want them away from everybody else's coins. I think that's one thing. As far as Zuckerberg, I think Zuckerberg fancies himself a CIA, wannabe. That, hey, it's your duty and, what have you. I could totally see a scenario where he's meeting with Trump or anybody else with the idea of, hey, we want you to present this coin to move the needle. Because let's face it, when he made that announcement, it did move the needle, and it heated up the conversation with regulation around the world and everybody, and brought digital assets to the forefront. So I think it could be, I don't know if the kid really wants a coin or not, or if maybe he feels like he's just doing his patriotic duty because they thought it would be a good idea, because they knew it would just get big news and big press all around the world if Facebook was going to launch a digital asset. Well, that's one way to start getting this adoption and the terminology out in front of people, and getting the talking heads on the news talking about digital assets, which is a new term for most people. What is a digital asset? But let's face it, Libra did that. Like I said, but I don't know if he really wants a coin or not. But I could totally see that happening. And then I don't know what else was after that. But those are two.
I guess the point there also is, from Trump's perspective, is Trump, shopping the market? Is he looking at, so here's Facebook's big announcement with Libra. We see the conglomerate of organizations, and forget about the short term. Everyone's so focused on short term with Libra. Well, this company left and that company left, and so it's imploding. You have one of the most powerful companies in the world right now. I don't think they care about a few that are leaving, their, this initiative that they're putting together, unless they shut it all down. But to your point, what's their, ultimate goal? I look at it, as, it's another mechanism of, connecting people and, and allowing easier, simplified payment solutions, and when you have a third of the world's population tied up on your platform, what's the best thing to do? Imagine for every transaction, assuming that, all their 2 point whatever billion users, start utilizing the Libra solution, and maybe Libra no longer is in the forefront. Maybe it also becomes a behind the scenes solution that nobody ever sees again. WhatsApp, all of a sudden you can move money on WhatsApp, and nobody realizes it's Libra, because Libra is the organization similar to Ripple and XRP, we brought this up in a conversation, Chip and I, with Lionel the other night or last week on the last week roundtable. Who really cares about XRP at the end of the day if it's the underlying solution for liquidity? Most people, when you get into mainstream America, mainstream world, they're not going to understand the technology, just like the majority of people have no clue about SWIFT. They have no idea what goes on in cross-border payment solutions. Most people aren't making cross-border payments. And even those that make cross-border payments don't even understand what SWIFT is. They say, oh, it's a SWIFT code. It's the code that I need to provide because it, identifies my bank. But they have no idea the organization behind SWIFT. And it's the same thing that is seemingly happening already within Ripple, and the rebranding, their terminology of ODL, and the same thing with Facebook with Libra, and so you have these, competing entities that are starting to pop up. SWIFT is going away, eventually, because it's going to become relatively irrelevant, or it's going to be absorbed into one of the solutions that are at play. So there seem to be a lot of power plays that are going on right now, which is interesting, and where is, Trump, in the middle of all of this, because we know he loves negotiating deals, and he's looking to set the United States back on track, to be, the number one, economic power in the world again, so there's a lot of factors, it's interesting.
You remember that video with Brad Garlinghouse in that IMF attorney, and that where he gets that smirk on his face and what have you. And it's like, he knows something.
Right.
But, one of the things that that attorney said is that, and the question was, will the IMF hold digital assets? And his comment was that the only way the IMF could hold digital assets, according to their legal framework, is that some country would have to use it first.
Right.
And that made me wonder, would Trump latch on to XRP as, and then all of a sudden you got Joel Katz out there doing a video on how you could run a stable coin on XRP, you know? And so what if we did a USC instead of USD? What if we did a US stable coin backed by XRP? And now the US is using XRP. Now that meets the legal framework for the IMF to take that on as a currency. And they can take the escrow and now start divvying it up and washing, if you will, all the world's debt with each other with a reevaluation and a global currency reset.
Yeah, but it's another interesting point too, because you bring up USC stablecoin backed or built on XRP. Again, you know, the most of the world population will be focused on USC, and we'll still have no idea about what XRP is doing for the
exactly.
USC.
They won't know
what it's backed by or what
it's running by. Yeah.
Yep, and it's just the liquidity solution, you know, which
the U.S. is definitely going to lose the world's reserve currency status. Like Chip said, you know, it's you know, at best 100 years that, you know, in world history.
It's a matter of time, yeah.
It's never gone over 100 years, and we're at like 98 years. So, you know, that's going to go away. But one of the things that I've suggested is that XRP is the only shot that I could see. You have central bankers, which is basically private banking. There's that whole argument that Trump and other leaders around the world, President Xi, I think in China, they could all decide to dump private bankers and like, hey, we're done. We're starting our own walled garden digital assets, and we're done with the Fed. And like you said, Chip, the Fed's gone.
I think that's closer to the truth right there. I think that right there, that's what I'm kind of sticking with. I kind of feel like that's it. But you got to remember so many people put so much time and energy into the International Monetary Fund, the IMF. Think about it. They get over 50% of their. It's basically a charity, right? It's a charity that helps other countries that are undeveloped. And so everyone's like, the IMF, the IMF. Well, what is the IMF? Jeff, you have any idea who the biggest contributor to the IMF is?
The U.S.
It is the U.S., right? So the U.S. donates close to 50% of what they get. I think there's like 40 participating countries to get that number. But the IMF is nothing more, and it's a very bloated organization. I don't know if they just opened this brand new building. It's stunning. I mean, it rivals what happens in let's say Silicon Valley or some of the other great places in the world. I just don't put a lot of stock in that because I really don't care about the IMF. The IMF is a distribution system. However, I do care about adoption, and I think that's kind of what we're looking at. Not necessarily the IMF, but I think what you're saying, Venture, and what we're all saying here is I think you got to dump the Fed. I think everyone has to do it, and if everyone does it together, you know, it's not going to be the U.S. saying, "Hey, we're going to do it," but I think you kind of like latched onto something when you start seeing it with Japan, what China's doing. And you know, my take on China is China. Listen, it's your bonus round. If you're spying on your citizens, if you're not letting them into big cities because they don't have the social score to get in there and they don't have the means, you know, no one sees that. And if you have more, you know, human abuses than any other country in the world, man, you now tie into the blockchain and being able to control everything and have everything transparent in a communist country. You know, this is one of the most amazing things. And people, I think, are looking at it the wrong way. They're looking at it like, well, look, China's doing it. China's doing it out of self-interest, like you said. They're doing it because they want to crack down. They want the adoption of their coin, and they want adoption. They're communists, but they're also business-minded, right? They're also going to make sure that other countries can can help raise the value of it. But I really think it's themselves. You know, that's my personal take.
It's a total attack on the U.S. dollar. They're tired of U.S. sanctions.
Correct.
You know, U.S. Controlling SWIFT. Quite honestly, because you know they come down pretty hard on SWIFT. Hey, we don't want you transferring money to them. You know, they're under sanctions. Russia, China, Iran. They all want away from the U.S. dollar and the U.S. sanctions.
They already have. They've already gotten off it. They've already stopped using it.
Yeah, yeah. And the way to do that is to have their own, digital asset or their own currencies that in a system like SWIFT to, trade between them. So yeah, but the one thing about the IMF, though, you said it in your remarks, was that it is a distribution center. It would be the place to go to distribute. If there was some kind of a computer model simulation of wiping out world debt, that would be the place to deposit. If in fact XRP was the chosen one, and that would be a place you put a large portion of the escrow for them to balance everybody's books, because they're a distribution center and they're not a country.
I heard they're leaning towards XLM, Stellar coin. That's what I've heard lately. I'm just kidding. I don't know that. I don't know that.
Didn't they just burn 50% of their?
This is crazy. I don't know what they did that for, Venture. I mean, Jeff, what's your take on them burning that? I mean, they're trying to make it more valuable because there's less of it.
I think, just having a little bit more control over the overall, from a marketing perspective. But we don't know, there's other, they have other partners that they're working with as well, with IBM using their technology. I think that as much as Stellar, I invested in Stellar, I hold XLM. I looked at it as a micro payment solution, as an offset to XRP, and this is, overall Ripple with XRP is being utilized. The primary purpose of XRP at this point, outside of other, potentials that are developing, but the ultimate purpose is cross-border payment and large cross-border payments, so being the hands of the banks. And it's interesting too, because at one point, obviously everyone refers to it as the banker's coin, and who cares, because it's being utilized for a critical solution. But at the same time, and I'm trying to remember who brought this up, it might again been on a conversation with Lionel, might have been on a completely separate video, I don't even remember, to the point where some of the banks might not want citizens or individual investors to hold XRP. They don't want to be in a position where they say, look, XRP is our coin. XRP is our solution. As a large financial institution, we're utilizing Ripple. We're potentially even holding XRP for liquidity purpose. We don't want investors holding it. We don't want investors to potentially, control, a majority stake in XRP and offset the value. If we dictate the value is X, we don't need other people dumping on the market and trying to pull their money out to offset things, to upset things. So that's an interesting concept to think about. XLM, on the other hand, was introduced specifically from a nonprofit perspective to help the quote unquote underserved or unbanked in different parts of the world move money and do it from a micro payment perspective. And that was the original purpose. If you read through Stellar, that was their ultimate goal. Their goal wasn't to compete in the bigger space. So we have two different tokens or coins or what, with specific purposes in mind. Now, XRP is a little bit unique, in the XRP ledger, the platform, as is Stellar. So you have like IBM building solutions on the Stellar solution that has nothing to do with XLM at all. Whereas the same thing with the XRP ledger, as we've talked about, you can build within it because it has it has a built-in exchange. It serves a purpose. So you have two interesting solutions, but I don't know where it's going with that in terms of why did they burn it off. That is absolutely no explanation as to why they burn it off, because I have no idea. But in terms of project wise, I believe that the projects were built for two separate purposes, and that's why Stellar and XLM even kind of as a corporation spun off away from the purpose of XRP, because they saw a use case that XRP wasn't really meant to address at first, or was Ripple. So I think that was the reason for it. Again, why they burned it off, I don't know. Maybe, there's got to be a purpose. There's got to be something that they're working on, potentially longer term strategic value of it. Again, I think too many people are focused in on the day to day. of where's the price moving. There's positive news, negative news. We have to remember, we're not investing in a stock, where, you have other things going on from a corporate perspective, internal balance sheets that could upset from day to day the valuation of the stock. Here again, good news, bad news, has nothing to do with a digital asset per se at that given moment, especially the good news. Until you get full utility, you're not going to see, you might see a little bit of a FOMO uptick, and you might be able to measure that in that 5 to 10%, change, but it's not going to be, significant, so I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, I think that I don't think there's a dang thing wrong with holding the top 10 coins, and those might vary, but the top, let me put it this way, the top 10 coins where you believe in their use case. I'd have some. I'd buy some. I don't hold any right now. I've held it in the past, but I don't have any now. But I think the burning of half of it was, you'd probably seen XRP going nowhere. What it appears to be going nowhere in price. Maybe he thought burning off half of it. The old supply and demand thing. Doesn't really matter. I mean, he's got his reasons for it, but I think XRP and Ripple is going to be in micropayments every bit as much as any other company. In fact, I think they've, obviously with their investment in Coil and others, that I think at some point they're going to be all things payments everywhere.
That's why I think with Bitcoin, look, I like Bitcoin. That was how I came to the space myself back in 2013. And, ironically, it was a cross-border transfer that actually finally got me going, hey, this is better than waiting 3 days. I can't believe I'll have this in 12 hours. That was amazing. And it was, the whole idea of this digital asset that I was able to get. And that was pretty good. But I do have a lot of affinity for Bitcoin. I just get a little weary when I hear people talking about it as a payment rail. If 80% is held by the top 5% of the people, the universe has really greatly shrunk down, right? So they don't know, 3 to 5 million are lost forever. I think 17, 18 million has been mined already. There's not really a lot more to go when you think about it. So the value I think will always be there. I'm one of the believers that think we'll eclipse $100,000 with Bitcoin. But I don't think, it doesn't really have a use case. You can build a Lightning Network, you can build this thing and that thing, but if you don't change the core, this is one of the things that I think that XRP really saw, and the guys at Ripple really saw the deficiencies and what Bitcoin had to be able to roll something out better. I mean, and everybody has that potential, right? There's voting right now. We know that it's decentralized, and Ripple cannot veto anything because they don't have the voting power anymore like they did before. We just eclipsed that recently. But this is something that I like, is that you have to have the ability. And it's, again, if you go burn the 50% of your thing, you're like, yeah, everyone cool with that? We're all down with it. Does that make sense? Let's do it. And then you do it, and you're like, geez, man, I kind of wish we could have had a do-over, a mulligan on that, right? It's right. Like you don't get that mulligan to try to go back and do it. So what I love about the fact that some of these newer digital assets is they've got voting rights. You want to change something, you see a deficiency, let's put it up. Let's find out if we can shake it, and David Schwartz put out a really good blog post not too long ago with some really phenomenal ideas about some possibilities. And again, this is a reality. It's never going to be a reality for like a Bitcoin, right? It's not going to be, and I look at what's happening with Ethereum. Remember these ERC20 coins, it was like candy. Any name you can think of, there's a coin for it. There's literally 5, 6, 7,000. Everybody, there's airdrops. But again, you start seeing people moving away from building on their blockchain. You start seeing some other really nice solutions come into play. Like we just interviewed the CEO of an X network, and they have their own blockchain that you can spin up. So there's some really effective strategies around what you can do with digital assets. And I think that really what I look at XRP and the foundational stuff, I really never worry about price, right? 22 cents, 23 cents. Is it a bummer? It is, and you go like, wow, man, that wasn't what I was expecting. Because some people bought it at 70, some people bought it at 280, some people bought it at $3, right? And it doesn't really matter. I mean, if you believe in its use case and you believe in its core philosophy, we're really waiting out on regulations. We tiptoe around regulations, but again, we always have to raise that point in regulations, because that's really, what bank is going to take it on? Now, a bank might employ the let's say like a MoneyGram, right? They want a third party. They want to wash their hands. They're using this as a third party company to move stuff. They already get fined enough. They get fined, billions of dollars every year for money laundering and everything else. They're not going to open up another opportunity to get slapped down by the government. And they certainly want to make sure that, why would you open yourself up? You want to mitigate risk when you're a bank. You try to do it the best you can. And without regulations in the U.S. and other places, it's great to see what's happening in Japan and some other countries, even in France. It's good to see some of the new advancements that are happening. But I don't necessarily know what you guys think about the whole Bitcoin. Well, Bittrue too. Let's get on that. But the whole Bitcoin sort of scenario. What do you see that as going? What do you see the next 5-10 years for Bitcoin?
Sorry, I lost you there for a second. I just asked that question. What was the last part of that question?
You cut out for a second.
Did I cut out? Yeah, there's some weird thing going on with the stream.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No problem. I was saying, what do you think the future holds for Bitcoin as far as what's going to happen with it?
Well, I'm not as bullish on it as I was, because I was one of those that you got to have at least one. Tuck it away. You got to have at least one. There's only 21 billion, probably 18 million left, and you got to have one. But I don't know. We always talk about it's going to be a store value. It's got name brand recognition and what have you. Well, quite honestly, I can take any value and divide it by 30 cents, and I can store my value there too. So
22, but that's.
Yeah, 22 today. 22.9. 22.9.
We're getting there. We'll do it together.
Yeah, but I just don't know. I don't know if it's going to have. I mean, if it's just going to be a just cause thing. Yeah, because I wanted one. I don't know. I don't know if it. Even if it went to, I don't care if it went to 250 a coin. What do you do then? I mean, it's a store value, but I could store $250,000 in a commercial property downtown that I'm collecting a residual income on. So yeah, like I said, I'm just not as bullish as I was, and it certainly is not without other technology that may come later or whatever to do something with it. Right now, I think its biggest contribution to the space is that everybody knows the name.
Like Cheers. Everyone knows your name. There you go.
Cheers. Yeah, everybody knows your name.
Cheers, that TV show from what was that on the?
Every time you ask somebody about a digital asset, oh, you mean that like Bitcoin? So
exactly. Yep. People know Bitcoin. They definitely, it's gotten out there, good or bad. I do believe though that different digital assets have different use cases. In certain use case like Bitcoin, they call it the digital gold. Is it going to have a purpose? It may or may not. You can't really transact it. Is it going to keep going up in value? But like you said, like with an XRP, you can still hold XRP, but you can still hold US dollars too. You can put them in your account. Your value at some point, like on the US dollar, the little bit of interest that you can earn in the bank might not equate the same amount that you can earn, if you're looking for gold to appreciate. So maybe you have money in gold instead, or maybe you diversify your portfolio. Bitcoin is the first one in. Does it become the most stable at some point? Is it the most solid? I don't know. I mean, there's so many, and Chip brought up, I think, a good point that the majority of Bitcoin right now is in the hands of 5% of, or 5, was it? No, 5%.
80%. Yeah, 80%
is held by 5% of, 80% of the supply is in the hands of how many people?
I think it's 3 to 5% of holders. So, I mean, It's even more scarce than we thought.
Yeah. So, but another point is also what control right now does China have over Bitcoin? Do we know that, with the amount of, mines that they, potentially were setting up, pulling and extracting, Bitcoin, I think there's a lot of argument, in this space. But the entire space right now is tied together, so as Bitcoin goes up, I believe the rest of the market goes up. As the rest of the market goes up, Bitcoin is going to appreciate as well. And I think, each component, again, since you have different use cases like VeChain, the VeChain solution, for instance, has a specific use case. Could you build, a solution on the XRP ledger that would be comparable to, what VeChain accomplishes? I'm sure you could potentially, but again, I think that they had a specific use case in mind, kind of segueing away from Bitcoin. I just think there's so much out there. It's not just about the coins, and eventually you brought it up as well. It's about the use case. The companies that have a solid use case will potentially be around in a couple years, and that's where we're going to get the value. It's about the utility. It's about the use case. Bitcoin doesn't really have a use case yet. That other than this store of value.
But I will argue
no
this
real use case, right?
But I would argue the use case, I think, is really helping the adoption. So, for example, Grayscale just filed to become the first Bitcoin fund to report to the SEC. I think this is where they're really helping out. So the fact that they are going to, because Grayscale is a really good purveyor, and recently they just came out with XRP. They came out there and started talking about XRP and Ripple, and they made a couple little errors in the way they described it. But the bottom line, I think, really, I'm almost thinking that Bitcoin's main use case is that Bennett is helping everybody below, like with a hand up. They don't realize it, and the Bitcoin maxis would never tell you that. But without Bitcoin, we don't get that hand up. Where we're pulling the other coins up, what we call why are they called altcoins? Because there's Bitcoin, and then the other ones are the alternate coins, right? So I think this SEC thing, and because Grayscale has done such a phenomenal job, and because they're so public out there, man, if they go through with this and they start reporting to the SEC, that just opens the doors, the floodgates for other digital assets. And like Venture, what you were saying, like if you're holding the top 10, we kind of know that those top 10, especially whether they're utilities, they have a lot of utility like a VeChain, or just the top 10 by market cap, I think they come along for the ride.
I agree. One, just food for thought about Bitcoin would be, Bitcoin's whole store of value was supposed to be outside of the fiat system. If it imploded, then you had your money stored in Bitcoin. But if they fix the fiat system, if we go back to the gold standard, then would that not then maybe diminish the need to have something outside of the, if you have see, here goes the dogs. If you have your currency backed by gold, then, sorry, she'll quit. The mailman just pulled.
She wants to be on camera, big time.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, he's going away now. Sorry, guys.
That's okay.
But that's one thing that I've thought about too. That if Trump and these other world leaders, even Kim Jong-un in North Korea, he's meeting with him privately. There's this theory that there's this banking cabal that even Kim Jong-un would like his country back. If they dump these private bankers and fix the fiat currencies around the world, create a level playing field backed by gold, then maybe Bitcoin doesn't have quite as much need as a store of value outside of the new fixed system, assuming they actually fix the system.
That's my concern. Does anything ever get fixed, really, when you put politicians in there?
No,
they make a ton of money themselves, though.
But hopefully it gets better. But the one thing that we know is that the course we're on is completely unsustainable anyway.
Right.
We just crossed 23 trillion.
It's
and that's
insane.
not even counted the unfunded liabilities in the U.S.
Right.
Well, that's not the pension funds and everything else that we have, this Social Security and all the other things. That's just the debt.
Right.
23 trillion. So
not sustainable.
No. Not when 3/4 of your GDP is going to pay, the debt, you got a problem.
And we have record money coming into the treasury. That's the craziest part about this. It's record. That's never been done before in the history of this country, and it's still not even close enough to cover it, right?
Right. Well, it's scary too, because I can remember studying in economics, and this, you look it up now, but 2/3 of our debt of our budget goes towards transfer payments and Social Security, transfer payments towards welfare, but 2/3 of the budget. So, and that's where, imagine now, so if a third of the budget is now going towards paying off the debt, 2/3 of it going towards transfer payments to keep everybody else afloat, where's the rest of the budget come from, and hence the deficit? And that's where the deficit's going to keep going. So if you're trying to make up deficit payments, and yet your expenditures are so out of whack, which is, bringing things in a little bit, shrinking the size of government, obviously there's so much more to it, but obviously, as you guys said, it's not sustainable. It has to change. There has to be a new solution. It's not unique to the United States, because debt's spiraling out of control around the world. A reset at some point is going to be necessary, or, as we were talking about earlier, we need another potential solution, which I like the idea of, distribution of XRP, and say, hey, here you go. This is a method of liquidity. It's a method of, getting rid of deficit. It gives everybody in the world an opportunity to start over again. Many of the countries, just like now, if you distribute $1 million to every person in the United States, the wealthy are going to be wealthy and the poor are going to be poor. It doesn't matter. It's just a matter of management, money management, what happens. And it's the same thing with countries. They're no different. So you're going to have countries that are going to spiral back into deficit, and you're going to have, but it gives everybody, some time to breathe. And, digital currency is here to stay. Hence we're seeing governments, trying to speed up a mechanism to start controlling it.
Well, I think you're going to see, I think the only thing that we either have a financial crisis, first of next year, or I think as far as Trump's involvement, we talked about, him meeting with Zuckerberg and where does he stand on this whole thing. And, he came out and made his big statement about, I'm not a fan of Bitcoin, what have you. And I think that's because China controls the mining. He's not going to let China have anything, So, but I think I have a belief that he's just trying to get past this next election where he doesn't need to run again. Correct. And if you think he's outspoken this 4-year term,
oh yeah,
imagine what he's going to be saying, after November 1st, 2020. So, by the way, XRP Venture, if you put that in a Gematria calculator, I just did it for fun the other day. It's Make America Great Again is what it is, one of the options. It's kind of funny.
It's awesome, man. Yeah, I think I saw that tweet. That's pretty interesting. Hey, listen, we're coming up on an hour. This is just, I don't know how that hour got away from us, but this has been phenomenal. It's been great having you on, Venture. Again, you're a bright, fresh air for the community. We always just really appreciate the fact that you come from your heart, and it's really evident. And I think that's what people have connected with, is that they've connected with, when you're talking from a deep place inside, it just kind of comes out. And that's really great to see your success out there, and that you're a voice out there in what's happening. And, thank you for coming on here and just kind of sharing with us and, joining the roundtable today. Jeff, anything? Jeff is frozen.
No, yeah. Again, I just want to, am I frozen?
Oh, you're good.
Okay,
there you go.
I just want to say, the same thing. Yeah, just basically what Chip just said. Again, it's really appreciate you coming on. Appreciate you starting your channel, and becoming a beacon within the community. Yeah, I think it's outstanding.
Well, you guys, it's awesome. I'm elated to meet you guys, and it's very kind, the things that you've said, and I appreciate the chance to do it. Of course, I think we agreed before we were going to do this, we were going to talk about tokenizing real estate. We never even got there. We never even got there.
That's the next time. That's why, right? That's why we'll have to talk about that next time. I think.
Yeah, we'll have to do it again.
Right.
Yeah, we'll have you back on, man. We'll definitely. And we'll wait. We'll talk about something else, and then you'll bring it up at the end again, and we'll be like, we'll get him next time.
We'll get him next time.
Get it next time.
Keep bringing you back
there's
on.
A lot. There's a lot. Anyway, you guys are great. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you again. And for those of you guys watching, we have two channels that we want you guys to tune into. But this is On the Chain. This is the roundtable discussion that shows every Sunday. So tune into our roundtable discussion with members from the community, talking about great topics like we did today. You can tune in actually tomorrow night, Monday. What's tomorrow? Is the 28th, 25th? I don't know, 28th. tomorrow is the 25th, and we will be broadcasting right here, premiering an interview with the CEO of BlockDrive. So make sure you guys tune in for that. We'll shoot out a tweet with the time that is going to premiere tomorrow night. And again, tune in, look at the descriptions below to look for On the Chain and On the Chain Live. And with that, I think we can sign out.
Sayonara.
Are you down with OTC? Please like, subscribe, and click the bell to be notified when the next video drops.